Good morning, everyone. This morning's Bible passage is Esther chapter 8, but it would be a tragedy to leave these 5 days with just missing one chapter in Esther. So we're going to take a running start with Esther chapter 7. Okay. So, the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king asked Queen Esther, "What is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half my kingdom, it will be granted." And Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. Because I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we'd only been sold to be male and female slaves, I would have kept silent because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." And the king asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is the one who has dared to do such a thing?" And the queen answered, "An adversary and an enemy. He is this vile Haman." And Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up, left his wine, and went out to the palace garden. Haman, he realized that the king had already decided his fate, so he stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden into the banquet hall, Haman was falling over the couch where Esther was reclining. And the king said, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the words had left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the king's eunuchs who attended to him, said, "Oh, a pole 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." So the king said, "Impale him on it." And so they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. And the king's fury subsided. That same day, the king granted Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai, he came into the king's presence because Esther had told the king how he was related to her. And the king took off his signet ring that he'd reclaimed from Haman and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Queen Esther again appeared before the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he devised against the Jews. The king held out the golden scepter to her, and she arose and stood on her feet, and she said, "If it pleases the king, and if I'm in favor in his eyes, and if he thinks it's the right thing to do and he's pleased with me, let him issue a decree to revoke the dispatches which Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, devised and wrote against the Jews in all the king's provinces. Because how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" And the king replied, "Well, because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they've impaled him on the pole that he had set up. Now write another decree on behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's ring, because no document written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring can be revoked." So, at once, the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan. And they wrote out all Mordecai's orders To the Jews in all the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the nobles in the 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed the dispatches with the king's own signet ring. They were sent in the script of every province and the language of every people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. And Mordecai sent them on mounted couriers, riding fast horses, especially bred for the king. The order stated for the Jews to gather together and to protect themselves and to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed man that would attack them and their women and children, and also to plunder the goods of their enemies. A copy of the text for the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Spurred on by the king's command, the royal couriers went out, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. Mordecai left the king's presence in garments of blue and of white, with a large crown of gold and a purple garment, a robe of fine linen. And the citadel of Susa gave a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and gladness, joy and honor. In every province and to every place to which the king's edict went, the Jews gave great celebration with feasting and joy and gladness. Many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. Hear the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.